So let's get started with the session. So hi everyone and welcome to this session on how to crack CMAT. So in this session, we are going to talk about what happened in CMAT in the last 2 years and what are the learnings from that. So what is it that you can implement for this year? Of course, we don't know when CMAT is going to be conducted. The dates have not been announced yet. But yes, we'll have to, of course, prepare as if it is going to happen maybe in the next 3 weeks or so. Uh, it's very unlikely that it will happen in March, considering they had extended the deadline and so on. But yeah, mostly sometime in the April first half, or we don't know exactly, but let's prepare for it and be ready. So we are going to talk about all of these things in the session today. I think we should be done in about half an hour or so. And if you guys have any questions, you can feel free to ask it during the session. And towards the end, if we have time, we can also take more questions. So let's get started. And the first thing that I want to talk about is CMAT 22. Now, CMAT 22 is a change from what it has been earlier. And if you think of the history of CMAT, CMAT used to be a paper which used to have 4 sections, right? So it used to have Quant, LR, Verbal, and GK. So every section used to have 25 questions. So total 100 questions, 180 minutes. That used to be the format, and it was the format for a. So if you look at all the past CMATs, that was the format that it used to have. But then in the year 2020, 21, I guess, they announced that they're going to have this innovation and entrepreneurship as a new section. But they announced that it was going to be an optional section. So earlier, if you look at it, innovation and entrepreneurship never was there as a section. They just introduced it. But they didn't know what exactly to do with that, and they sort of kept it as an optional thing. So people had a choice. If you want to attempt, you can attempt. Otherwise, you leave it. And those who decided to attempt it were given 30 minutes extra to solve that particular section. But then they now have made it mandatory. So innovation and entrepreneurship is now a mandatory section that appears, and all the other sections, the number has gone down from 25 to 20. So in each of the sections, you have 20 questions now, total 5 sections, making it the 100-question paper it is. And the time limit is the same, which is 180 minutes. So with respect to CMAT, speed is generally not an issue because most of the students are able to solve the paper, right? The speed generally does not become a constraint because you have 180 minutes to solve 100 questions. And if you look at it, general awareness and innovation and entrepreneurship, a lot of these are either you know it or you don't kind of questions, which will not take you more than, say, a minute per question, right? And that is why what you should do is when you look at these, and I'm going to talk about the time that you should be spending on each of these, but then you need to understand this will not take a lot of your time. So speed is not going to be a major issue. It ultimately boils down to being a content based exam. So if you have very good content across the other sections as well, then you will do well. Otherwise, you will not do well. Okay, so speed is generally not an issue. If you look at the last year, quant, LR, and language were straightforward, right? So they can be classified as easy. And if you actually look at the paper, which is available in IMS dashboard, you will realize that it is fairly doable, that you can maybe attempt nicely 15, 16 odd questions as well, or even more than that, with more than 80% accuracy. Now, accuracy is definitely one bit that you have to be careful about, considering there is negative marking. So there is a +4 -1 marking scheme that you have. There's no sectional time limit and there's no sectional cutoff that you have here. So the first 3 sections, quant, LR, and language, were fairly straightforward. But then GK and innovation and entrepreneurship became sort of the deal breaker for a lot of people because they were difficult. Now, again, difficulty of GK or the innovation section is a subjective assessment. Ultimately, let's say, for example, there's a sports question and you are an ardent follower of a sport. You see that question and you think, oh, wow, this is something that I know. But for somebody else, it is very, very difficult, right? So that is why assessment of GK is also like a subjective thing. But overall, if you think of it, I think a lot of people would have found it difficult. Now, let's talk about what are the score versus percentile requirements here. Now, this data, of course, will keep changing from year to year. So you have to take it with that sort of a caveat. On the difficulty of your scores are going to vary, and basis that the percentile is also going to vary. So now when you look at last year data, the score of 300 translated to 99.5 percentile. And this is roughly score of 300. Don't take it to be exact 300. 270 roughly was 97. I think, let me try, giving a lot of issues. Okay. So score of 270 was 97 percentile. Score of 260 was 95. Score of 240 was 90, and so on. You can read it on screen right now. But then, as I said, depending on the test difficulty, the cutoffs fluctuate. Right? So the difficulty of GK innovation is fairly subjective thing. Because when I looked at the innovation and entrepreneurship section last year, I thought that it was fairly doable. I think a very good candidate who is coming from, let's say, a management studies kind of a background, and is somebody who is well read in terms of the business newspapers and related topics, I think would have done a very good job of cracking the innovation and entrepreneurship section. So when I took it the last year, I had 100 percentile on that section, purely because I'm somebody who likes reading about business, and I like reading about management as a discipline. So somebody who is coming from that background would have found it very, very straightforward. But yes, of course, for a lot of students not having that background, it can be classified as a difficult thing. Now, if you look at the same score versus percentile relation, you will see that in 21, 325 was 99.5 percentile. And note that at that point of time, innovation and entrepreneurship was an optional section. So 318 was 99. So there's a very small difference between 325 and 318, just 7 marks. But then the drop is from what, 99.5 to 99. From 99, when you look at 95, just a difference of 18 marks. Every mark is going to count. It becomes very, very tight. Even last year, if you look at it, look at 270 is 97, 260 is 95%. So just that gap of 10 marks is causing a gap of 2 percentile between aspirants. So that is why you need to understand that let me try to maximize my score as much as possible. The strategy is not so much on the speed at which you solve questions, but are you solving questions correctly or not? And that's the main focus that you're going to have for your preparation. Now let's talk about the individual sections. Okay. Now when we'll start with quant first, and in quant, as I said, last year's paper was very, very straightforward. A lot of questions were there which could have simply be done by, say, substitution or just by taking a couple of steps, and you're hitting the right answer. So sectional difficulty of this was easy last time, and somebody who is a nicely prepared candidate would have even done maybe 18, 19 questions. But I think for a lot of people, doing 16, 17 as well should not have been very, very difficult. Again, this is assuming that you are somebody who is a well-prepared candidate for a test like this. Because somebody who hasn't done a lot of prep, who is not very serious, will find it even difficult to attempt maybe 8 questions. But for a well-prepared candidate, we can say that a 16, 17 would have been definitely possible. What was dominating was arithmetic, of course, in this. So out of 28 questions from arithmetic, which is percentages, TST, time and work, and all of that. And arithmetic has to be focus of your prep as well. Even historically, they have asked a lot of questions on arithmetic. So make sure that you do arithmetic very well. Geometry, direct questions on mensuration, triangles were there, modern math probability questions. In numbers, questions on number properties. And algebra, you don't have a lot of questions typically in CMAT, but then you can get like one question each of linear, quadratic, etc. In the past, I've also seen questions on functions. So I would suggest that you at least study a little bit of functions before you go for the test. And finally, data interpretation. So tables and pie chart based, this is something which I have seen CMAT generally like. Typically, they will ask tables, either complete or incomplete tables, pie chart based questions, and then either a line graph or a bar graph based. That is something that they typically focus. Now let's talk about logical reasoning. So logical reasoning again was fairly straightforward last year. Well-prepared candidate should not have found it difficult to solve about 16, 17. Very little verbal reasoning, 5 questions out of 20, which included assumptions, inference, assertion reasoning, and so on. And analogy and odd word out expression. Now, non-verbal reasoning is something that you will have to do. Again, I'm thinking a lot of you are also taking the CET, which is happening this weekend on 25th and 26th, which is taking care of a lot of this prep. So whether it is questions on directions or series, numerical series or alphanumeric series and so on. Arrangement based questions, matrix arrangements, linear arrangement sort of thing. And then family tree, blood relations, set theory based questions or Venn diagram based questions. So those are very, very important from CMAT perspective as well. Now, towards the end, I'm going to show you a table which will list out all the important topics that have appeared from the last 2 years. Take it as an indicative thing. It does not mean that, okay, you will get questions only from these areas. But then considering last 2 years, if those are the kind of questions that have been asked, it's better to focus on those topics. Let's move ahead. Let's go to language comprehension. So in language, surprisingly, last year the paper was easy. Typically, I've seen that language is not very, very straightforward. I mean, it sometimes you might get an RC which is very painful to read. Sometimes you might have a very, very straightforward RC. So RC, there was one RC on organization and development of mega cities, some 350 words approximately, and fairly easy to read. 4 questions on that. Now, vocab is generally or vocab-based questions is another dominant area, wherein you will have questions related to synonyms, antonyms, fill in the blank. Now, these could be vocab-based, this could be preposition-based, idioms, spelling-based questions, so identifying or filling the blanks with the right spelling. Then grammar-based questions, again, another major area with 5 questions on it. Fill in the blanks, identifying the correct statement or part of the statement which has an error, and then direct speech-based questions, so direct, indirect speech conversion. And then verbal reasoning, there was one parajumble that right? So parajumble made an appearance last year, and then even previously it has made an appearance. But you don't get a lot of questions from parajumbles. Okay? So fairly limited, maybe 1 or 2 questions is what you will typically. Then comes the other area which people find difficult, which is general awareness. Now, I've seen a lot of people, especially after the test or even before the test, keep complaining that they're not doing very well on the GK, and or they will come and say that we did XYZ things, but we got questions related to ABC. Please understand that GK has no limit; it has no syllabus, right? You Anybody can create GK questions which are very, very random. So it doesn't mean that when they look at GK as a section or they create GK questions, they are only going to cover all the important things that happen. And who even decides what is this definition of important? So that is why you can do whatever you can with understanding that I might not be able to get a lot of questions. For all you know, out of 20, you might confidently know only 6 or 7, right? What do you do about the rest? Do you maybe take some half chances or you leave those questions? That is up to you. Those are the calls that you'll have to take. Now, in one of the years, what I did was I marked all GK questions, right? And I didn't know a lot of those questions. That was the problem. I think I knew about 8 or 9 questions, and I just marked all the other questions as well. The problem was most of those questions that I randomly marked turned out to be incorrect, and that hit me massively. So you have to be careful as well. You can't simply be marking everything. Now, static GK, most of the questions last year were static, which is another problem because if you can prepare for current affairs, they tend to be very limited in scope. Let's say, for example, when I tell you prepare for current affairs for 1 year, right? I'm restricting the scope to 1 year. But static GK has no restriction whatsoever. So there were 16 static questions, 4 current affairs questions, and we would say that a decently prepared candidate who has prepared for CMAT, who has prepared for GK, would have attempted about 8 to 10 questions. Now, what kind of questions were asked? A lot of questions related to constitution were there. So related to articles in the constitution or the languages that are defined as per constitution and so on. Now, sports questions also they've made an appearance there in CMAT earlier as well. History, books and authors, awards, biology, geography. We thought initially it could be physics as well because it was like a phenomenon. It's classified as a geography question. Questions related to dance forms, scheduled languages, as I said. So now there is no limit to what you do. So that's why we'll say whatever is exhaustive, at least try to do that much and then do maybe the current affairs of last 1 year. Now, people who have taken TISNET would have done massive amount of prep for GK. Also, people who might have taken IFT or ZAT, etc., would have done some GK prep. And that is definitely going to help. But for CMAT specifically, you have the CMAT compendium in your IMS dashboard. You can have a look at that, do the current affairs of, let's say, at least 6 to 8 months, and pray that you will get something from that, because you'll always see something that you don't know. So nobody should be blamed for it. I mean, a lot of times people come and say, I didn't get any question from these, whatever, 5 things that I read. But then there is no guarantee whatsoever that you will get questions from them. So understand that there's no syllabus for GK. Prepare whatever you can. I will say at least 6 to 8 months of current affairs. And then static GK, whatever quizzes that you can keep taking, keep doing that. Okay, so that is something that will help. So let's move to the next and the last section, which is innovation and entrepreneurship. So how do you prepare for this area? And by the way, you can prepare for this nicely. Okay? This is one area where I feel that uh, as as opposed to GK, you can actually prepare very well for innovation and entrepreneurship. Now, there are two things that I've seen in this section. When they introduced it for the first time, they had also asked a reading comprehension passage in the section, which was related to some sort of a community-based banking system, or how people avail loans in community banks and something. Uh, and it was easy to crack because there were some 8 or 9 questions on that RC itself out of 25 at that point. Now it's a 20 question section, and now they're not asking any RC in this. Now everything is, again, either you know it or you don't kind of a question. Static general kind of questions, it was 13 last year, and 7 current affairs. Now, what kind of current affairs would be asked? Now, think of anything that you will see in a business magazine or a newspaper, right? So, if you were to open, say, Mint or Economic Times or Business Standard or Business Line, or if you were to use any magazine for reading, which is related to business, you are going to see current affairs related to business. And that is precisely what you can prepare for this. So, business specific GK is what you need to prepare. Now, what kind of other questions would be asked in static? Taglines, right? So, for example, Kodak, you press the button, we do the rest. That used to be a tagline of Kodak at a point of time. So, you can prepare for a lot of these taglines. You can prepare for, they don't typically ask logos, but then it's good idea to know a few logos, taglines, and of course, founders, CEOs, those are the things that are very, very important from this particular section. A lot of management concepts are also asked. So whether it is from business, economics, management, for example, what are, say, 4 Ps of marketing? Very, very simple concept in marketing that a lot of you will end up studying in a B school. Some of you might have already done it at your BMS level, or if you have done a BBA or something. But then a lot of people would not have that. Now, how can you prepare for this? Firstly, we have given a CMAT compendium in which there is a section on innovation and entrepreneurship. Okay, so there are five notebooks that we have created for that. You can start going through it. Now, what I'll suggest is you don't stop there. Now, what you do is once you read a particular thing, go to the Wikipedia page of that and try to read a little bit more about it. For example, Six Sigma. Right? Now, there's a very well-known concept in operations and management called Six Sigma. Now, what is Six Sigma? So you read that in the compendium. But now you go to Wikipedia page of Six Sigma and try to see, okay, who introduced it, right? Or why did they introduce it? Or who are the quality gurus that are that people generally look at? What is a quality circle, for example, right? Who is Deming? So do a lot of this secondary research on your own. You will have to do that. Otherwise, you will see that just reading, okay, this is not going to help. You all are planning to become MBAs, right? So you will find this particular knowledge very, very useful as you actually enter your business. Okay? So I particularly like this section a lot, and people can prepare for it. Start reading a financial newspaper or a business newspaper, and just whatever term that you come across. So let's say, for example, you come across something called preferential shares, right? Or equity. Now, what is equity? What is debt? Just go and Google it. Go to Wikipedia page, read a little bit, then go to Investopedia. There are n number of things that can be done, right? I mean, even subscribing to something like a FinShots will give you access to so much things that you can practically Google, and then try to know more about it. And that will just add up to your knowledge, which will help you to crack this section. Also, what I saw last year was a lot of common sense usage would have helped people to answer questions, because there were some questions which had options which could be straight away eliminated. So even if you don't know something, you might not have studied it, but you can still answer it by taking guesses on eliminating the incorrect ones, the obvious incorrect ones. So this is like the slide that I was talking about, wherein I've just listed down. I'm not going to read it out. I looked at last 2 years papers and then put all the topics that are the major topics from the top three areas: font, LR, and lang. I'll take a couple of questions. How do we do revision? And okay, I'll come to that a little later as we talk about the strategy bit. Um, do we have to be good in quant? Definitely, you'll have to do a reasonable job, because we have seen the kind of cutoffs that CMAT has in the past. 300 plus is what you're aiming for if you're looking at, say, a 99.5 or more. In some cases, even a 300 plus can give you a 99.9. You never know. I mean, it depends on the difficulty of the test. But in any case, you'll have to do a decent job. And I would suggest that you have a look at last year's paper, because it will give you a clear idea as to what sort of questions to expect. Last year, the year prior to that is also given. I'll give you the path to find those papers. So please take those and then benchmark it against those years' percentile. Any source to prepare for GK? Of course, IMS GK zone has a lot of content, whether it is weekly current affairs summaries or exam specific compendium, which has a CMAT compendium in it. You can go through. Now, somebody has asked whether it will be enough to go through CMAT compendium. As I said, for GK, there is nothing that can be guaranteed. No matter what you do, there will always be questions that you don't. So earlier, I used to consider myself pretty good at GK. Now, over the last few years, I would say I've not been following it as much as I used to earlier. And even at that point of time, whenever I used to go for tests, I would often come across questions that I had absolutely no idea. So it's not that doing something will just be sufficient. When will the test be conducted? Nobody knows that yet. Let's hopefully expect it to be maybe April first half, but we don't. Omkar is asking whether they ask questions on mergers and acquisitions. I think as long as it is part of current affairs, it's a good idea to do it. So anything that has happened in the business world recently, maybe some big IPOs that have come up, some mergers, acquisitions that might have happened, you can definitely have a look at those. Out of 100, what should be net correct for a 99 plus? Okay, so cannot be really guaranteed in any sense, but then looking at last few years, I think you should be aiming for at least a 280. So that translates to about 7. Never know with what difficulty the paper will have. What's a safe score or percentile for GBMS? Now, for GBMS, when you're applying, you're essentially applying for using CMAT, you're applying for all India seats, which are 18 in number, and they typically have a very high score requirement. Generally 99.9998. That's the number that you're looking at. So the toppers of CMAT tend to be north of 330. Okay, so these are people who are getting more than 80 correct questions. So if you are somebody who is aiming for JBMS, I think you should be aiming for at least 80 correct questions. You can aim for 85, you can aim for 90, but at least 80, it will at least put you in contention. I hope people have noted this down. Maybe we can move ahead, because that's going to be the last slide that I talk about, which is the strategy. And then we'll take any further questions that you guys have. So now what do you do from here? Right? Assuming, let's say you have maybe 3 weeks, 4 weeks, we don't know that yet, but whatever it is. The first thing is I'll solve past year papers. It will tell me exactly what sort of things CMAT is looking for, and then I can pinpoint areas and start working on them. The first thing is CMAT 2020 and 21 papers are available as PDF in your resources section. So you go to MyMS, go to resources, go to past papers, and then you will find CMAT 2020 and 21 as a PDF with solution. Now CMAT 22, we have released it as a test format. So you can actually take it as a full length paper as well. You go to MyMS, go to test, go to CMAT, and then you'll see CMAT 20. I suggest that all of you take it as a test, understand how much you would have scored. The second thing is the full length papers that we have given you, the mocks that have been created, which are sim CMATs. So take those mocks that are given to you that will really boost your prep. For GK and innovation entrepreneurship sections, as I said, within GK zone, within CMAT compendium, there are a lot of things that are available. So start going through that. And as I have said, for innovation and entrepreneurship specifically, business GK is very, very important. So do that. That will help you. And reading a little bit more about that concept. If, for example, if I just say World Bank, right now, somebody might say, okay, where is headquarters of World Bank? So that is a direct question. But let me just go and read a little bit about World Bank. That will help me identify some nuances, which will help me in the actual test. Also decide the section attempt order. Because first of all, see, there's no sectional time limit or I mean, you can jump from one section to another and all of that. But even then, I would suggest that you should have a fixed section order. Now, why does that help? Firstly, it just helps you to plan a little better. I mean, if I decide that, okay, the first 45 minutes I'm going to spend on quant, I don't really have to think too much about it. I just say, fine, 45 minutes, I'm not worried about other areas. I'll just focus on quant. Okay. Now, the order you can decide for yourself. One thing that I typically recommend people is to not have a look at GK in the beginning, unless you're somebody who is very good at GK. The only reason being people start thinking negatively about it. At least I do. If I see the GK section earlier and like the first section, and I don't know a lot of things, I will start getting a little worried about my attempt. So that is the only reason why I say that GK as the first section that you see on the test is not a good idea, unless you're somebody who is like very, very confident also. Then depending on your strengths, you can start. So you can say, okay, I'll do quant 45, 45, 45 for verbal, quant LR verbal, 135 minutes done. Then GK for another 15 minutes or so. And then I have a lot of time for innovation entrepreneurship. A lot of people might be even less than this. So it's possible for very good candidates to even finish paper maybe half an hour prior. Now, what do you do in that case? You check the answers that you do. So you recheck your quant and LR questions at least. See to it that you have not made any silly mistakes. Maybe in a hurry, a lot of times we tend to make those mistakes. So do a checking in case you finish your paper earlier. That's it. And focus on areas that are the most relevant for CMAT. As we saw on the previous slide, maybe I'll take you back there for a moment. Start working on these areas. If there are some things that you haven't done properly, for example, I saw somebody has written, I'm not good at algebra. The simplest thing that you can do is go back to your books, the IMS material that you have, go through linear equations, go through quadratic equations theory, solve about 15, 20 questions of each, and then you're good to go, right? Because you will see a lot of direct questions. And please have a look at last year papers. As I said, 22 paper, if you see it, I think those of you who are scared of quant will start worrying a little a little less about it, because quant wasn't that difficult last. Cool. Thanks everyone. Bye.